My name is Lucasta bint Abdullah, and my life was once defined by faith, family, and a deep sense of purpose. I grew up in the village of Alaya, a place where time seemed to stand still, nestled in a valley surrounded by rolling hills. Alaya was a world of golden mud brick houses and endless desert skies. Here, life revolved around tradition and devotion to Allah, as unchanging as the call to prayer that echoed through the village 5 times a day. My father, Abdullah, was the village imam, a man of profound wisdom and unwavering faith. His calm, steady presence was the foundation of our home, and his teachings shaped my earliest memories. My mother, Amira, was equally pious, her hands often busy with prayer beads when she wasn't tending to the needs of our family or helping neighbors in need. In this atmosphere of devotion, I found my place as the imam's daughter, a role that carried both pride and responsibility. If you believe in God and near-death experiences, subscribe to Life at NDE today. Discover inspiring messages from God through powerful near-death stories that bring hope and understanding. Hit subscribe now and join us in spreading the light of faith. From an early age, I was immersed in the Quran, sitting cross-legged in the village madrasa, our religious school. The lyrical verses flowed from my lips long before I could fully grasp their meaning, yet they filled me with a sense of awe and connection. By the time I was 10 years old, I had memorized large portions of the holy book. I can still see the proud smile on my father's face and hear the approving murmurs of the village elders when I recited the verses flawlessly. As I grew older, my faith deepened, and I embraced my role with enthusiasm. While some of my peers questioned or strayed from our strict traditions, I found solace in prayer, fasting, and study. During Ramadan, I willingly endured the long, hot days without food or water, seeing the physical discomfort as a test of my devotion. Life in Alaya was simple but purposeful. We woke before dawn for prayer and spent our days tending to the date palms that sustained us. The rhythms of nature and faith bound us together as a community. Festivals like Eid al-Fitr were times of joy and unity, where families gathered to share food and laughter. As children ran about in new clothes, I felt the strength of our traditions, their roots running deep through generations. By my late teens, my father began preparing me to carry on his legacy. He taught me to lead prayers, deliver sermons, and offer guidance to those in need. At 18, I made my first pilgrimage to Mecca. The journey was grueling, but the moment I saw the Kaaba, I was overcome with emotion. Tears streamed down my face as I joined the sea of white-robed pilgrims, feeling closer to Allah than ever before. Returning to Alaya, I dedicated myself to studying not only the Quran but also the Hadith and Islamic law. My father's approval was evident, and I felt I was fulfilling my purpose. By my mid-20s, I had earned the respect of the community, married a devout man, and become a mother to 2 children. My life was a tapestry of faith, family, and duty, a life I believed to be complete. But even as I embraced this role, there were moments when the vastness of the desert sky stirred questions in my heart. On quiet nights, I would gaze at the stars, wondering about the mysteries of the universe. Was there something more beyond the boundaries of our village and the certainties of our faith? I quickly pushed these thoughts aside, believing them to be distractions from the path Allah had laid before me. It was on a scorching Thursday afternoon that everything changed. Our village well, a structure older than anyone could remember, was running dry. As one of the younger and stronger members of the community, I volunteered to help with the repairs. The well stood at the edge of the village, its stone walls weathered by time. When I arrived, I found a group of villagers gathered, their faces lined with worry. Water was life in our arid land, and without the well, our survival was in jeopardy. Lucasta, Ahmed, one of the elders, called out to me, "The opening is too narrow for most of us. Can you climb down and inspect the pump mechanism?" I nodded without hesitation. Removing my outer robe, I tied a rope securely around my waist. My father approached, placing a hand on my shoulder. His voice was steady but tinged with concern. "Be careful, my daughter," he said softly. "May Allah protect you." With a deep breath, I began my descent into the cool darkness of the well. The air grew damp, and the walls were slick with moss, making each step precarious. At the bottom, I found the pump submerged in a shallow pool of murky water, its rusted parts worn from years of use. As I knelt to examine the mechanism, my thoughts drifted to the evening prayers I would lead and the stories I would tell my children before bed. But then, my foot slipped on the slick stone. In an instant, I lost my balance. My hands flailed, searching for something to hold on to, but there was nothing but empty air. As I fell, I whispered the Shahada, "There is no God but Allah," the declaration of faith I had recited countless times before. Then, everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in the well. I stood at the edge of an expanse so vast and dark it seemed to stretch into infinity. The air was thick and stifling, carrying a sulfurous stench that made my throat burn. Beneath my feet, the ground felt like hot coals. Yet I was not burned. As my eyes adjusted to the oppressive gloom, I began to see shapes moving in the distance, writhing, shadowy forms. The air filled with moans and screams, a sound so haunting it made my heart pound in my chest. A booming voice shattered the silence, calling my name, Lucasta bint Abdullah. The sound reverberated through the expanse, and I knew in that moment that my life would never be the same again. The voice that called my name reverberated through the oppressive darkness, deep and resonant, as though it came from the very air around me. Lucasta bint Abdullah. It intoned again, commanding my attention. I froze, my heart pounding as I tried to steady my breathing. I wanted to speak, to cry out, but my voice felt trapped in my throat. Instead, I took a hesitant step forward, the ground beneath me scorching yet strangely not burning my feet. The shapes in the distance became clearer as I moved, their outlines writhing and distorted. The moans, screams, and cries of anguish grew louder with every step I took. My stomach churned, and an icy dread crept up my spine. I had read descriptions of Jahannam, the Islamic concept of hell, countless times in the Quran. I had even spoken of it to others, warning them of its terrors, but nothing had prepared me for this. As I drew closer to the shapes, I realized they were people, or what was left of them. Their forms were grotesquely twisted, their faces contorted in pain. Each soul seemed trapped in a torment uniquely tailored to them. I saw a man whose tongue was repeatedly cut out, only to regenerate and be cut out again. The voice boomed above me, explaining, "This is the punishment for those who spread lies and falsehoods." Nearby, another figure was forced to swallow burning coals that seared through their body. "For those who stole from the poor and the orphaned," the voice declared. The sight overwhelmed me, and I felt my knees buckle beneath me. "No," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "This cannot be. I have lived my life in devotion to Allah. Why am I here? Why am I seeing this?" As if in response, the shadows parted, and a figure emerged in the distance. My heart sank as I recognized the face of Prophet Muhammad, bound in chains of fire. He endured an endless cycle of burning and regeneration. His eyes, filled with torment, locked onto mine, and I felt a wave of despair unlike anything I had ever known. "This is not possible," I choked out, my voice shaking. "He is the seal of the prophets, the messenger of Allah. How can this be his fate?" The booming voice returned, now tinged with what I could only describe as sorrow. "He led many astray, Lucasta, for every soul that followed his teachings. He bears responsibility." My mind reeled, struggling to comprehend what I was witnessing. The foundation of my faith, the truths I had been taught since childhood, felt as though they were crumbling beneath me. I wanted to run, to escape this place, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. I could only watch as demons surrounded the figure of Muhammad, mocking him with jeers that cut deeper than any physical pain. "Where is your Allah now?" they sneered. "Where are the rivers of milk and honey, the virgins you promised?" The agony in his eyes mirrored the anguish in my heart. "No," I whispered again, shaking my head. "This cannot be real." Suddenly, a soft light pierced the oppressive darkness, growing brighter with every passing moment. It was unlike anything I had ever seen, gentle yet powerful, warm yet commanding. The light seemed to radiate peace, and as it approached, The screams and moans around me began to fade. A figure emerged from the light, and I immediately felt its presence fill the space with a sense of overwhelming love and calm. The figure was a man, dressed in simple robes, his hands and feet bearing wounds that glowed faintly in the light. As he drew nearer, his kind eyes met mine, and I felt as though he could see into the deepest parts of my soul. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by his presence. "Lucasta," the man said, his voice gentle yet firm, cutting through the air with authority. "Do not be afraid." I recognized his words, though they were not from the Quran. They were words I had read in comparative religion classes, words attributed to Jesus in the Christian scriptures. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper, though in my heart, I already knew the answer. "I am the way, the truth, and the life," he replied. "No one comes to the Father except through me." Tears streamed down my face as I looked into his eyes, feeling both comforted and undone. "Why am I here?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You have been shown this place to understand the path you are on," he said, his voice filled with compassion. "You have sought the truth all your life, Lucasta, but the path you have followed is veiled in shadows. Now, you must choose." As he spoke, the oppressive landscape around us began to fade. In its place, I saw a vision of indescribable beauty, a realm filled with light and peace. People of every nation stood together, their faces radiant with joy, their hands raised in worship. The air was filled with a sense of harmony I could scarcely comprehend. "This is the kingdom of heaven," Jesus said, gesturing to the vision before me. "It is open to all who put their faith in me and accept the sacrifice I made for their sins." I wanted to ask so many questions, to understand what I was seeing, but before I could speak, I felt a force pulling me back, as though I were being drawn out of this realm. "You must return now, Lucasta," Jesus said, his figure beginning to fade. "Remember what you have seen, and choose wisely." The last thing I heard was his voice, gentle yet urgent, saying, "I am with you always, even to the end of the age." I gasped as I opened my eyes, the harsh sunlight of Alaya flooding my vision. I was lying on the ground near the well, surrounded by a crowd of concerned villagers. My father knelt beside me, his face filled with relief and worry. "Lucasta," he said, his voice trembling, "are you all right? We thought we had lost you." I wanted to respond, but my mind was spinning. The vision was as vivid as the faces around me, more real than anything I had ever experienced. I need to rest," I managed to say, my voice hoarse and weak. As my father helped me to my feet and guided me home, I replayed the vision over and over in my mind, the images of torment and light, the words of Jesus, the peace I had felt. It was all too much to comprehend. Little did I know, that moment would mark the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything I had ever believed and lead me to truths I could never have imagined. The days following my vision were unlike anything I had ever experienced. I carried out my daily tasks as usual, but inside, I was a storm of confusion and doubt. The sights, the sounds, and the words of Jesus lingered in my mind, refusing to fade like a fleeting dream. It was as though the ground beneath my feet, once so firm and steady, had turned to shifting sand. I tried to tell myself it was nothing more than a hallucination brought on by the fall, but deep down, I knew better. What I had seen, what I had felt, it was real. It was undeniable, and yet, it was impossible to reconcile with everything I had been taught. I began questioning parts of my faith that I had always accepted without hesitation. First, it was small things, the verses I had memorized as a child, the rituals I performed each day. But soon, the questions grew larger, pressing against the core of my beliefs. What did it mean that I had seen Muhammad in torment? How could Jesus, revered as a prophet in Islam, be the radiant figure who claimed to be the way, the truth, and the life? For days, I kept my turmoil to myself, not daring to speak of it to anyone. My father noticed my distracted air and questioned me gently, but I could not bring myself to share what had happened. How could I, knowing the consequences of even suggesting doubt in our tightly knit community? At night, When my family was asleep, I would sit by the window, staring at the stars and whispering desperate prayers. Allah, if this vision was from you, show me what it means. If it was not, then help me forget it. But no clarity came, and the vision remained as vivid as the day it happened. One evening, as I helped my mother prepare dinner, she spoke softly. Lucasta, you've been quiet lately. Is something troubling you? I forced a smile and shook my head. No, Mother. I'm just tired from the work at the well. But I could see the worry in her eyes. I felt guilty for keeping secrets from her, but I knew that sharing them would bring nothing but pain. It was during this time of inner turmoil that I remembered Yusuf, a man from a neighboring village who had caused a scandal years ago by leaving Islam to embrace Christianity. At the time, his conversion had been met with anger and condemnation. I had been among those who judged him harshly, dismissing him as misguided. Now, I found myself thinking of him in a different light. Perhaps he could understand what I was going through. Perhaps he could offer answers. Under the pretense of a business trip, I traveled to his village. Finding him was not difficult. His small carpentry shop stood at the edge of town, away from the bustling market. When I entered, Yusuf looked up from his work, his eyes narrowing slightly in recognition. For a moment, tension filled the air. The last time we had seen each other, I had joined others in condemning his choice. But then his face softened, and he set down his tools. Lucasta, he said, his voice calm but cautious. It's been a long time. Peace be upon you, Yusuf. I replied automatically. Then, after a pause, I added, I need to speak with you about your faith. His eyebrows rose in surprise, but he nodded and gestured toward a small table in the corner. Come, let's talk. As Yusuf prepared tea, I struggled to find the words to explain what had brought me to him. When he set a steaming cup in front of me and sat down, I finally found my voice. I had a vision. I began, haltingly. I saw hell. I saw Muhammad in torment. And I saw Jesus. Yusuf's expression changed from curiosity to deep attentiveness. He didn't interrupt as I recounted everything: the fall into the well, the vision, the radiant figure of Jesus, and his words about being the way, the truth, and the life. When I finished, silence hung between us. Finally, Yusuf spoke, his voice thoughtful. I did not have a vision like yours, Lucasta, but I know the turmoil you're feeling. When I first began to question, I felt as though my entire world was falling apart. I leaned forward, desperate for clarity. But how did you know? How did you come to believe that Jesus is more than just a prophet? Yusuf reached for a worn book on a nearby shelf, a Bible. He held it out to me. Read this, he said, especially the New Testament. It will help you understand what you've experienced. I took the book hesitantly, feeling its weight in my hands. Possessing a Bible was not forbidden outright, but it was frowned upon, and I knew I would have to hide it carefully. What if I'm wrong? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What if this is a test, and I fail it by questioning my faith? Yusuf smiled gently. That's exactly what I thought at first. But ask yourself this: if Allah is truly all-knowing and all-merciful, would He punish you for seeking the truth with an open heart? His words stayed with me as I returned home, the Bible hidden beneath my robes. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I began to read. The words of Jesus felt different from anything I had read before. They spoke of love, forgiveness, and a personal relationship with God, ideas that resonated deeply with the vision I had experienced. Yet the more I read, the more my turmoil grew. The teachings in the Bible seemed to contradict much of what I had believed all my life. And yet, they also felt undeniably true. I prayed fervently, but not in the structured way I had been taught. Instead, I spoke to God as though He were beside me, pouring out my confusion and fear. Show me the truth, I whispered into the darkness. Even if it's not what I've always believed. My behavior did not go unnoticed. My father questioned why I was reluctant to lead prayers, and my mother watched me with growing concern. Even my young daughter, Aisha, asked why I no longer told her stories from the Quran with the same enthusiasm. I knew I couldn't keep my struggle hidden forever, but I didn't know who I could trust. To voice my doubts in our village would be unthinkable. The punishment for apostasy was severe, and even questioning certain tenets of Islam could lead to ostracism or worse. I continued reading the Bible in secret, drawn ever closer to the figure of Jesus. His words echoed in my heart, filling me with both hope and fear. The vision had set me on a path I could not turn away from, and I sensed that the journey ahead would be as dangerous as it was transformative. Little did I know, the choices I was making in those quiet, hidden moments would soon come to light, and the cost of my search for truth would be far greater than I ever imagined. The day I decided to follow Jesus was the most terrifying and freeing moment of my life. It wasn't a single event, but a culmination of sleepless nights, whispered prayers, and the steady pull of his words. I had spent weeks wrestling with the vision I had seen and the truths I had read in the Bible. Finally, one night, I knelt in the darkness of my room and spoke from the depths of my heart. "Jesus," I whispered, tears streaming down my face, "if you truly are the way, show me. I am ready to follow you, no matter the cost." In that moment, I felt a peace I had never known before, as though a heavy weight had been lifted from my soul. But with that peace came the sobering realization that my life as I knew it would never be the same. It wasn't long before my secret faith began to draw suspicion. My hesitation during prayers, my distracted demeanor, and the hours I spent poring over the Bible didn't go unnoticed. One evening, my father confronted me. "Lucasta," he said, his voice heavy with concern. "Something is troubling you. You are not yourself. What is it?" I hesitated, feeling the familiar pang of fear. "Father, I am searching for truth," I said cautiously. His eyes narrowed. "Truth? What truth could you possibly seek outside the Quran?" I could not bring myself to tell him the full extent of my journey, but I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. In the days that followed, whispers began to circulate in the village. Neighbors noticed my absence from communal prayers. Questions turned to rumors, and soon, I realized that my safety and that of my family was at risk. With a heavy heart, I made the decision to leave. I told my family I needed to journey to the city to seek further religious study. It was a half-truth, but it spared them the full weight of my decision. My father reluctantly agreed, though I could see the worry in his eyes as I said goodbye. In the city, I found refuge in a small Christian community that met in secret. They welcomed me with open arms, offering me a place to stay and a new sense of belonging. For the first time, I was able to openly worship and share my experiences without fear. The community became my new family, teaching me more about Jesus and guiding me as I navigated my new faith. I took on a simple job to support myself and spent my evenings reading the Bible and learning from other believers. Yet, even in this newfound freedom, I carried the weight of what I had left behind. I prayed constantly for my family, especially my young daughter, Aisha. I longed for them to understand, to see what I had seen, but I knew the path I had chosen might never allow for reconciliation. Still, I pressed forward, trusting that Jesus would guide me, even as the shadows of my past loomed large. Life in the city brought with it a new kind of freedom, but it was a freedom tempered by constant vigilance. In Alaya, I had been surrounded by tradition, family, and familiarity, but here I was part of a secret community of believers who walked in the shadow of danger every day. I knew that my decision to follow Jesus was irreversible. It had cost me the safety of my old life and the acceptance of my family, but it had also given me a peace and a purpose that I could not deny. Our community gathered in hidden places, small apartments, the back rooms of shops, or quiet courtyards shrouded in the stillness of the night. Each meeting was a mixture of joy and caution. We sang in hushed voices, shared the teachings of Jesus, and prayed fervently for one another. Despite the risk, there was a profound sense of unity among us. We were bound not by blood, but by faith, and that bond was stronger than I had ever known. One evening, during one of our gatherings, I received news that filled me with both hope and trepidation. My younger sister, Aisha, had reached out to one of the believers. She had secretly been reading the Bible pages I had sent and wanted to learn more. The thought of Aisha questioning the faith we had grown up with brought a flood of emotions: joy, fear, and a deep longing to see her again. Through careful planning, we arranged a meeting in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city. I arrived early, my heart racing as I watched the door. When she finally entered, I barely recognized her. The girl I had left behind had grown into a young woman, but her wide, searching eyes still carried the spark of curiosity I remembered so well. "Lucasta," she whispered as she sat across from me, her hands trembling slightly. "I don't understand everything I've read, but it feels different." These words, they speak to my heart in a way I can't explain. I reached across the table to take her hands in mine, my own shaking as well. "Aisha, the truth of Jesus is unlike anything we've ever known. His words are alive, they pierce the heart and open the eyes. But this path is not easy, and it is not without cost. Are you prepared for that?" She hesitated, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know," she admitted. "I'm afraid. What if Father finds out? What if the Imam does? They'll never understand." I squeezed her hands gently, my own tears threatening to spill. "I know, Aisha, I know the fear, but I also know the peace that comes from following him. It's a peace that surpasses all understanding, even in the midst of trials. Hold on to that, no matter what." We talked for hours, but the meeting was all too brief. As she stood to leave, slipping back into the bustling streets, I whispered a prayer for her safety and for the seeds of faith to grow in her heart. The joy of reconnecting with Aisha was quickly tempered by the growing danger back in Alaya. Word of my conversion had spread, and with it came whispers of condemnation. One evening, as I returned to my small apartment, I found my father waiting for me. His face was a mixture of anger and sorrow, and it pained me to see how much he had aged in the months since I'd left. "Lucasta," he said, his voice heavy, "you must come back. Your mother is ill. She prays for you every day, hoping you will return to your senses." Hearing of my mother's illness struck me like a blow. I longed to see her, to hold her hand and comfort her, but I knew I could not go back, not to the life they wanted for me. "Father," I said, my voice trembling, "I love you and Mother more than I can say, but I cannot deny what I know to be true. I have found the way to God, and I cannot turn back." His expression hardened, and he thrust a letter into my hands. "Then you leave me no choice," he said. "If you do not return and renounce this heresy, the Imam will issue a fatwa against you. Do you understand what that means?" The weight of his words was crushing. A fatwa would mark me as an apostate, a traitor to Islam, and make me a target for anyone who believed it their duty to enforce the punishment. My life, and the lives of those around me, would be in constant danger. "I understand," I replied quietly, though my heart was racing. "But I cannot change what I believe. Jesus has shown me the truth, and I must follow him, no matter the cost." For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of pain in his eyes, but he turned and walked away without another word. As the door closed behind him, I sank to the floor, clutching the letter and sobbing. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty. The community rallied around me, offering prayers, counsel, and unwavering support. We discussed the possibility of fleeing to another city or even another country, but I couldn't bring myself to leave just yet. I felt called to stay, though I didn't fully understand why. 3 days later, my father returned, but this time his anger had softened. "Lucasta," he said, his voice low, "I don't understand your choice, but I see that it is not made lightly. I have spoken to the Imam. For now, the fatwa will not be issued, but your path is still dangerous. Be careful." Tears filled my eyes as I embraced him, whispering a prayer of gratitude. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a step toward understanding. In the weeks that followed, I continued to grow in faith and purpose. I shared my testimony with others, helped new believers find their footing, and prayed constantly for my family. The cost of following Jesus had been high, but the reward was greater than anything I could have imagined. Looking back, I saw how far I had come from the day I fell into the well. That vision of hell, that encounter with Jesus, had set me on a path I never could have dreamed of. It had taken me from the safety of tradition to the uncertainty of faith, but it had also brought me to a place of peace, purpose, and love that surpassed anything the world could offer. No matter what lay ahead, I was ready to face it, knowing that I was never alone. Jesus was with me, just as he had promised, and that was enough. If you believe in God and near-death experiences, subscribe to Life at NDE today. Discover inspiring messages from God through powerful near-death stories that bring hope and understanding. Hit subscribe now and join us in spreading the light of faith.